Welcome back to the studio, my little quilting friends. Today I have another very small little quilt. This is a baby quilt. I've been given instructions that it's for a boy, but I get to choose what I put on it. So, and I haven't even looked on the tablet yet to see what comes to mind. There's all kinds of things on this quilt. There's a cow jumping over the moon on the background fabric. It's got rockets, it's got some states in it. There's some ladybugs, stars, more rockets. All the different states are on it. Then there's some smaller items like tumbling blocks, rabbits. So I don't know what I'm going to choose yet. My first inclination, as I was thinking about it last night, was just doing bubbles, like oodles of doodles, bubbles, double bubbles, something like that. But I haven't decided. I do have the backing and the batting on the quilt frame ready to go, and I'm going to pop this on here. And you can see with the size of this, probably it's going to be less than a half hour of sewing time. If I had thought more about it ahead of time, I could have loaded this on there this way, and that would have sped up the quilt a little bit because of the fewer rows that it would take to stitch across there. But because I don't know what quilting design I'm going to use, that doesn't always work, because I do want the pattern to read the right way. I believe I've got purple thread on the machine, so I'm probably going to change my thread color to go with the quilt, but I'll see once I get this loaded. So let's go over to the machine, look through the tablet and see what designs come to mind. That may be the longest part of this video, is actually looking what we have and then going from there. So let's get this on the machine. Okay, I have the quilt loaded on the machine. I have it basted at the top, nice cotton batting, and my backing, you can see the backing extends well beyond the edge of the border so that it doesn't get caught up in the machine and cause a bump in the design or an obstruction notice. I have my measurements for the last quilt here. It's only 32 by 43, so again, this isn't going to take very long. And you can see I'm floating this one again because it's small. Generally, if it's a smaller quilt, I don't mind floating. I don't particularly like to float a really large quilt. I just feel like this is a little bit more controllable for me. So I have my machine back in the upper left-hand corner, which is how the IQ registers its starting point. So when I load the design, it's already going to know where it's at, and it will start accordingly. So I'm going to move you in a little bit closer so you can see the screen, and we'll look at some of the designs that are loaded on my IQ. I'm going to go through the basic steps that we always go through at the beginning, and start with Design Sew Quilt. It's a new quilt. I'm going to erase in progress, permanently erase in progress, and I'm going to reset my clock. Those are just basic steps for every quilt you start. And now I'm going to tell it that I want to do a pantograph, and I'm going to enter the rectangle manually. The actual size on here is 32 by 43, so I'm going to go 33, enter, by 44. Maybe 45, because I can always snap to it at the bottom. So I have 33 by 45 as my size, and you can see it pops up on the screen, so I can hit finished. Now I'm going to go to my patterns, and I'm going to go down to Urban Element Patterns. The IQ comes with a lot of designs preloaded on the machine. I'm going to select Urban Elements, and you can see they're alphabetical. One thing I will tell you, when you buy designs on Urban Elements, they always have an inventory control number in the front, and when I'm transferring my files, I like to eliminate that inventory control number because these come up alphanumerically, and so I would rather have them in the alphabet rather than the numbers. But what I also do on the ones that I've downloaded, I include the height of the design at the end. So this says agave 11, and I know that that means that the row height for that design was 11 inches. That's just basic stuff. So now I'm just going to go ahead and start looking through to the designs and seeing what they have on here. This one's kind of interesting. Amusement, it's 8.5. It kind of looks like tumbling blocks. So I'm interested in that. Animal Crackers Giraffe. That might be really cute. Animal Crackers, this has animals, giraffe, lion, and elephant. That one's cute. There's Animal Crackers Elephant. There's Batters Up that has baseball caps, a bat, some stars. That has some potential. This one's kind of cute. Boom. If this were cartoons, I might have used that. It has the little puffs of smoke and the little bangs, kind of like when Batman and Robin are fighting, and they have those little clouds. Christmas trees. Circle Play Advanced. This one's very nice. I actually added the word advanced on there because Circle Play doesn't come with that in its name. But to get these circles to line up perfectly is an advanced technique for loading on the IQ and realigning. So that's just something that you could also do, is make a little note of something on the name so that it is recognizable right away. This is called Constellation. It's a 13-inch design, which is a little bit too big for such a small quilt. Doodlebug with a, looks like a dog and a bone and a ball. Dragons, these are also cute. Malachite's one of my favorite go-to. Depending on what you put it on, it alludes to that type of theme. So it gives you a lot of texture and it sews out really beautifully, but I'm not going to use that today. Memphis Blues is kind of neat. It's just overlapping squares on diagonal. That's kind of nice. I think my favorite ones so far were in the beginning, though. Over the Moon. I think this is what I'm going to use. The background fabric, which you cannot see right now, is the cow jumping over the moon. And this is the cow jumping over the moon. So I think this is my selection. I'm not even going to look any further. So I choose that for both the even and odd rows, and you can see the design comes up. It shows 4 rows with a little bit of a gap in between. I don't like the gap, so I'm going to select gap and then just drag on the screen, and you can see that the design is now interlocking. It still is only 3 solid rows and 2 partial rows. And I'm going to pause just long enough so I can open up the Urban Elements website. I want to see what the actual design height is for this, because right now I have it 12 inches and I think I'm going to decrease that. But I want to decrease it to the actual size the pattern should be, and I don't have that information. So I'm going to pause just for a second. When I recorded the original video for Over the Moon, I had incorrectly learned information about the row height and pattern height when loading a design onto the IQ tablet. It was actually because of the of 3 quilts that I did for a friend that I finally became aware of the difference and the reasoning for the size difference. And that came about because I always include the size of the design with the name of the pattern on the IQ tablet. I make those changes before I bring them into the USB stick and onto the tablet so that I can make the right height. I don't design the patterns, so I don't always know what the intention was of the designer. But in this particular case, the quilt was being quilted for the person for whom designed the pattern. So she knew what size it should be. And it wasn't until she got it that this conversation came up about the difference between row height and pattern height. I don't work for IntelliQuilter either, so I don't know what their original thinking was for this variance. But I'm going to show you today the corrected version and include it in a clip instead of the original version of how I loaded this design. So that's the long explanation of that, and also I will tell you why I'm using this video at all. I had recorded 3 videos, and I do this all the time. I record them for the future because I have to stay busy, and we try and do a video every Saturday, and so I want to maintain that. But this particular week has been a week of mechanical and electronic failures in the studio, so I've been to my dealer twice this week, and the dealer's an hour away, and the machine still isn't working, so I can't just quickly replace it with something else, and I need to rely on one of those canned videos, which is what we'll be doing. So that's why I'm using this video instead of just trashing it, and it's also why I'm including this edited video clip. The original design that I used for this quilt was called Over the Moon, and I have the name on here as Over the Moon 10.5. That means that the original design was intended to be 10.5 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and select that as I did originally. We need to select it twice, both for the even and odd rows. And for the gap, all we have to do is touch the gap and run our finger diagonally, and that will decrease the gap between the 2 rows. So then we have what came up is row height at 12 inches and pattern height at 14.634. So I don't remember exactly what I would have done in that video because it's been several months, but if you select this button here, it has 2 things, row height and pattern height, but it's only really letting you adjust row height. If I hit the keyboard and hit 10.5 and enter, the row height is now 10.5. That's the only thing that actually lets you manually input the size or adjust. It's always going to be for that highlighted row height. But the pattern height is the size that the Panto would say on the website, how high it is. And that we have not adjusted to 10.5. In its current position, that is 12.80. So that is about 3 inches larger per size than it was intended. So in order for us to really get down to the 10.5, we have to either use the scale button or our finger, and we just have to keep decreasing it until we get to 10.5. Now the row height is at 8.622, which is not what I need, but the pattern height is 10.515. That's close enough for me to get to the correct size that it should be. So that's the correct way to input a Panto if you want it to be the size that it was intended. Of course, on all of these things, we could scale them up and down to suit our own needs. But if you want something to be as it was intended, and you don't know where to start anyway, the size information from the website or on the Panto is a great place to start. So I'm going to go ahead and hit finished, but I will say 2 things. One is that I am showing you this off of the quilt. This is not where you would input information to actually design it. I'm just showing you this as edited version. And also in the video, you're going to see that this design stitches out at the incorrect size. It's stitching out too large. So that's just something you could keep in mind as you're watching the video. So I don't need to save this because I'm not actually stitching it out, but I'll let you get back to the video that I shot earlier this year. We are finished with that first partial row. It took probably like 8 seconds to go across there. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my thread. Well, actually, I don't even need to pull it up. I can just hit start, and it's going to go down to the start point for row 2. And I'm going to go ahead and hit start. And now it's going to sew that across. It only has the remaining time for the entire quilt because the entire quilt was sequenced. So right now my time is 21 minutes, 21.4 minutes. That's for the entire quilt. That won't include me rolling up the quilt. That will take a little bit of extra time. So probably about 30 minutes and I'll have this whole quilt finished. And I got lucky because I forgot to base the edges. So I'm going to have to remember to do that on the rest of them because I don't want the hopping foot to get caught underneath the quilt top and then create a knot. Got lucky because I had purple thread on the bobbin and the medium purple on the top, and I forgot to change the thread, but we have purple in the ladybugs and a purple in this, and also the whole backing is purple, so I think it's going to be just fine. Also, that purple showing up really good on these yellow blocks, so that will help define the design. Okay, I've done with my first complete row. It's actually the second row. So I'm going to hit realign, and I'm going to need to roll the quilt up because I don't have enough room to do another complete row. So I'm going to do a realignment. Right now the screen is accurate. The red line is what I've already sewn, and the green lines are what I have yet to sew. So I'm going to choose an element that has not been sewn out yet. I'm going to choose the top of that star. Let's see. The top of this star is my realignment point, so I'm going to put my cursor there. And I'm going to go ahead and drop the needle. Now the needle is down in the quilt, and I'm going to release the tension clamps, and I'm going to advance the quilt. What I'm doing is making sure that I have enough height to sew out the highest point, which is that star tip. So when I advance, I know that I'm not going to get an obstruction notice because I know I can sew out the highest point of the next design. If I can sew out the highest point, I also know that I'm going to be able to sew out the lowest automatically because the design's only 10.5 inches or 10 inches, and I've got 19 inches of free space on my quilting space. So I'm going to go ahead and advance the quilt, and we'll get it set up for the next row. I've advanced the quilt. I've basted my two sides. I'm turning my head of my machine back to manual mode, which it has to be for the IQ. And now I have to realign. So the screen is asking me to touch a reference point on the screen. In this case, for realignment, I have to use a realignment point that I've already sewn out. So I think I'm going to do the bottom of the cow's foot right there. Now I'm going to take the needle and place it right where the bottom of the cow's foot has already been sewn out. And you can see that right now the cursor does not line up with that point. My reference point is here, but the needle position's way up here. So when I hit continue, it's going to correct that. It automatically moved the needle position to there and moved over to start row 3. It's taken its first stitch. I pull up my thread and I hit start. We have perfect alignment. The rows are interlocked the way that they should be, and I'm on row 3 already. Remember, there's only 4 full rows and 2 partial rows, so I'm just about halfway done with this quilt. It's saying I'm having a thread break, so I'm going to check that. It could be that I'm out of bobbin, since I've already done a whole quilt with this bobbin. So I'm going to check the bobbin thread, and then we'll get started again. When you have a thread break, you have to hit restart. I've already hit the restart button, and it says move the needle to the restart location. And so I go back to where I look on my quilt and see where the last thing that I was stitching. It has the crosshair as normal, and it also has the red dot with the crosshair and an arrow. The arrow is telling you what way the design was programmed to stitch. So like if you're going into a circle, it tells you which way the computer stitched it out. I know in this particular case I never got to the circle on here. I'm only about there. So I'm going to go ahead and drop the needle and pull up my thread. And yes, it was the bobbin that was out. So I know that the arrow is telling me that I'm going in the right direction, and when I hit OK, all of the red past that's going to disappear and it's going to turn to green, and it's going to be ready to start stitching now back exactly where I was on the quilt. So I can hit start. And it picks up exactly where I was without any missed stitches. Did you see me sneaking that thread out? Here we are coming with the moon. This will be the second time I've quilted a moon pattern. I can't quite remember the rhyme to this though. Hey, diddle diddle, the cat in the fiddle, the cow jumped over the moon. That doesn't sound right though, diddle diddle. Wow, that was quick. This one was finished 23 minutes of sewing time on the IQ and the Bernina. What we used was a design called Over the Moon. It's basically the shape of the moon and some stars and a little cow jumping over the moon, which, as it so happens, was perfect for the backing fabric because what we have are cows jumping over the moon. We have both full moon and partial moon. And I used a purple thread, which you really can't even see on the backing, but it shows up really nicely on the yellow blocks here. So you really can see the moon and the cow and the stars on here, so it turned out really good. We learned how to realign and how to restart after a thread break. In my case, it was an empty bobbin, but the sensor will say the same, thread break. So we got that finished. This is ready to be packed up and shipped off. I have it trimmed up. Is there anything else I have to say? Gee, thanks for stopping by. If you have any tips or tricks for quilting that you use, go ahead and add them to the comment section and we'll look at them, but also all the other people that watch these videos will get to see your tips and tricks also. So thanks for stopping by the studio, and we look forward to seeing you again next time. Ready for shipping.